Hello, I am Dominic Zusi, and my project for ESOC 214 is regarding the weather patterns in the Everglades. So, what is this all about? If you don't already know, the Everglades is a national park, which makes it a very important ecosystem. And as is the case with many ecosystems, it's very much affected by the weather. And what we can do about this is we can study the weather over time to further the understanding of the ecosystem. And that is, as you'd expect, what I do. I get some data from the public domain uh, out there, anyone can use it. And after cleaning it up, removing the data where, things were flagged or there were obviously fake values, like the maximum temperature was some like negative 10,000 degrees Celsius. Obviously, that's fake. So after all that, we have dates, and as you can see, the date variable, it goes year, 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 month, month, day, day. So it goes from February 1st of 1924 all the way up until December 31st of 2017, which is obviously a lot. And as you can see, based on the absolute maximum and the absolute minimums, there's quite a bit of variation among temperatures from negative 5 degrees Celsius all the way up to 38.3 degrees Celsius, which makes for some obviously varying data. Not to mention the precipitation total as well. I mean, there's plenty of days where there's no precipitation, but there's some days where there's 317 millimeters, which is quite a bit of precipitation. So, what about the graphs? You can see the maximum with the red dots, the minimum with the blue dots, and the mean, the purple dots. This is, again, you'll notice that there's a gap in the data. That's just because those days were removed because they were faulty. But you can see how things have changed over time. And really, the big thing is you'll want to look towards the bottom with the blue dots because you'll notice that in certain areas it dips pretty far down, while the red dots, the maximum temperature, they don't necessarily have as extreme of a variation. And so, what about the change in the mean over time? This graph, it only has the mean, and you'll see the change isn't really there. I mean, obviously it has been. There's thousands upon thousands of different days recorded, so there is a change. But when you take all of it together, it's not clearly notable. And it looks like, again, based on this graph, obviously not completely no change, but it doesn't look like there's much of a change over time. So I asked myself, could that be attributed to the precipitation? And as you can see here, the third graph, it shows precipitation over time in the Everglades. You look closely, obviously there's spikes, but we go back, you will notice that the minimum temperatures actually are more extreme when precipitation is higher. So we go to this point right here, for example, on the first graph. Look at how low the means are, or the excuse me, not the means. Well, the means are lower, but the minimums even more so. And that's because there's high precipitation. Again, we can go right here, at around 1936, it looks like. Again, really, really cold. So, before I get to my interpretation of the data, there is some limitations that I feel are important to address. The data is helpful. It is also not an explanation for everything. It's not, it's not saying because I see this, this is happening. That's not. I'm not trying to necessarily prove something here. This is an objective observation. And again, just want to really hammer this point home. Not every single day in the time frame was counted. There were some errors in the original data collection, so I did omit the flagged days. In addition, there isn't really much context outside of precipitation. You don't really know what's necessarily been happening, like, say in the 70s when the ozone layer was getting damaged, right? That doesn't take into account any of that. And then lastly, the data also factors in warm and cold months. So I'm not just talking about summer months. I'm not just talking about winter months. It is all months over time, which is certainly a potential reason why we don't see that much of a change in the mean. Uh, and now, of course, the big one. What does it mean? And as we can see, based off of this here graph right here, there hasn't really been that much change in temperature in the Everglades, at least not on average, over the last 100 years. Right, 1924 was when it started, and it's 2025 now. Um, and so keep in mind that this is in no way an argument against climate change. That is not what this is intended to do. This is a simple observation of the Everglades. And again, I also want to hammer this point home, not meant to influence you in any way. But one of the things that at least the graphs suggest is that precipitation does lead to colder periods, which would explain some, but not all of the reasons why the data would get cooler at times. Again, I show the correlation, really want to hammer it home. And then the Everglades itself, it is an incredibly complex system. We can't explain, everything about it with just the temperature and the amount of precipitations. There's so much that goes into it besides those factors. So it can't just really be narrowed down. And that is the end of my presentation. So I hope this was informative. And if you want to further your research, the Everglades is a very interesting topic. Thank you.